Frank Klose is in the house from 97.3 ESPN.com, part of Philadelphia.com and SportsTalkPhilly.com, where he covers the Phillies for us. And his Monday mailbag is up. And, Frank, you were at the game last night, and I don't know, you just heard us kind of riffing about a couple of things. I'd like to hear what your take was on some of the things that we had to say, primarily about the way Mackinnon managed the last couple of games, which I hate to be critical of him because I listed him as the main reason why this team has been competitive, but I did start to see some things last night that the last two games that I wasn't thrilled with.
Well, the one thing that I personally did not like was seeing Tommy Joseph pinch hit for Carlos Ruiz. I actually would have taken Ruiz over Tommy Joseph last night just because Ruiz had all the experience catching Jonathan Papelbon. So I was a little bit surprised to see that Tommy Joseph was coming out to bat for Ruiz. As I believe Pete said, Andres Blanco he's your main pitch hitter, so he might have been the guy to go to there if you were going to pinch hit for Chooch. Blanco hits better as a left-handed hitter. That might have made more sense. You could have bunted the runner over to third. Now you had somebody speedy, David Lowe on base, and then you would have had one out, and a fly ball ties the game. So I didn't like that play. I'm not too critical of Pete Mackinnon for his removal of Jeremy Hellickson. Hellickson's kind of been known to blow up later in the games as he's seen the lineup, coming around the third time. So I was okay with that, and in some respects, I think they're trying to preserve Hellickson's trade value. So take him out, 7 innings, 1 run. He looks a lot better that way, and everybody's talking about how well Hellickson pitched, even though the Phillies didn't come out with a W there.
Yeah, the Hellickson thing, I guess, to that point does make some sense. If he typically gets to that point in the game, I thought 79 pitches, and on a night where any chance to me anyway, you can preserve Neris and Gomez, who he brought Gomez in the game last night too. I think when I flipped back over, he was pitching the ninth when they were down. Any chance I can avoid using those two guys, I'm going to do my best to try to. If I can try to get through a game without going to Neris and Gomez, I'm going to do my best to try because I'm using them almost every single night. That was the pitch count, and I'm not a big pitch count guy, but 79 is pretty darn low. I would have tried to sneak him through one more inning.
Well, I think it was a little low, but at the same time, I think they really wanted the win. They really needed a win. Got swept by the Cubs, lost 2 out of 3 to the Tigers. By putting Neris in and having Gomez right behind him, I think he was thinking that would be the best chance to preserve the win rather than if Jeremy Hellickson's getting a little bit roughed up later in games, maybe that was the better chance to win. And as we saw, Neris just didn't have it. He's pitched phenomenally this year, and his ERA was, I think he came to the game with a 1.50 ERA. So to me, I thought that was okay. I was more questioning how he went through that final at bat when you had the two doubles to lead off the ninth.
By the way, Frank Klose's appearance is brought to you by Kevlar Builders and Developers of Absecon. You can trust the team at Kevlar Builders on the job, whether it's your home or business that needs work. Give Kevlar a call. They do it all, 609-827-3853 at Kevlar Builders and Developers. Your future is in their plans. Frank has the mailbag, which you can send Frank questions at Frank Klose, 973. That's Klose with a K. And let's see what some of the guys are asking this week. We start off with a guy from the minors. You're going to probably get a lot of questions about players in the minors here in the next couple of weeks. Dylan Cousins moving. Do you see him as a guy who is a legitimate guy who can come up to the majors and help out?
I think it's a little bit premature to think of Cousins in terms of the major leagues. Cousins certainly is playing very well at Double-A Reading. He leads the league in home runs. He's got 42 runs batted in. I mean, that's quite the offensive output for a player in his first 49 games at Double-A Reading. So I think we will see Cousins perhaps get a promotion to Triple-A at some point. If you look at Cousins' year last year, he spent most of it with Class A Clearwater, did get the promotion to Reading, and he hit very well there. He batted .350 in his short time with Reading. And then this year, if he gets most of the season under his belt, he's still hitting the Eastern League pitching. I think a call up to Triple-A Lehigh Valley is in order. One thing I would look at is once we get the draft going in a couple weeks, then you'll start to see some of those players that are currently in extended spring training. Some of them will go to low Class A with short season Williamsport which some will probably push into Lakewood, and we'll see a domino effect where they're going to need to push some guys up at AA and AAA, and he might be one of the guys that gets pushed up to AAA when the younger influx of talent comes from the bottom up.
Frank, you heard Mike and I talking earlier about Ryan Howard, talking about Tommy Joseph, basically the first base position, and Brandon wants to know in the mailbag, Darrin Ruf has multi-hit games in 3 of his last 4 games for Lehigh Valley. When will he get a chance again?
Well, I think Ruf had his chance. Unfortunately, I think a lot will have to happen before we see Darrin Ruf in the major leagues again. Now, yes, he had 3 multi-hit games out of his last 4 at AAA Lehigh Valley. He's hit 5 home runs in the month of May, so the power that he did not have in the major leagues, he's showing some of it at AAA. But at this point, the Phillies really have turned the page to Tommy Joseph. Now, Pete McCann, he did make that point of saying that, well, we're not going to let him sit up here and rot like Tommy Joseph. Tommy Joseph like Darrin Ruf, but Ruf is somebody who did get the chance in the outfield. He only played, 6 games at first base. But right now, if Ruf is going to make it back up to the Phillies, it's going to have to be in the outfield, and it's going to have to be because they have a gaping hole there. With Cody Asche coming back soon, I don't know when there's going to be an opening in the outfield for Ruf to get another shot. I would think that Ruf has a chance only if perhaps they trade away Peter Borges as a nice backup defensive outfielder to some contender, or if somebody gets hurt, he's on the 40-man roster, so it's really easy for Ruf to come back up. But until there's some subtractions, I'm just really not sure, even if he played really well at AAA Lehigh Valley, he'll get a call up.
Now, you mentioned Cody Asche. Will Cody Asche come back right away when they feel like, okay, he's healthy, he's ready, he's good? Are they trying to rocket him back up?
Well, if you look at his minor league performance, he's batted .160 since he's begun his rehab assignment, which is not too encouraging. He does have hits in 3 of his last 4 games at Lehigh Valley, which is encouraging, although he's only batting .188 at Lehigh Valley. So the question for me is he going to hit? He had 1 home run at Clearwater. He had 1 home run at Reading. So he's connected with a couple of baseballs pretty well. But the thing about Asche is he going to hit? And on the other side of that, how much has Manny Burris actually hit up in the major leagues?
And that oblique injury is you could easily re-injure that, right?
That is easy to re-injure. In fact, Asche came back too soon from his original injury, and thus he aggravated it some more. So I think they gave him enough rest that he's probably okay, but I'd be more concerned that he's just not getting his timing down and not getting any hits. So if he comes up to the major leagues, maybe they're in a position where they can tolerate him figuring his swing out at the major league level, but right now he's just not hitting. So he does have options to the minor leagues, so they could easily option him to AAA and then give him a few more weeks if they felt that he needs to get his timing down. But again, Manny Burris has been playing a lot.
I think I could hit better than Manny Burris. Not run as well.
I can't, but I'll defer to you.
I actually thought, it's funny because when Howard hit that double last night, the first thing I thought was, Burris can run for him. I thought that was the opportunity to get him a little bit of a...
Well, he'd already pinch hit at that point.
Oh,
so
did he?
He's the one who pinch hit for Helgson before.
Ah, okay. I wasn't watching at that point. I gotcha. Question here. Frank Klose is in studio at Frank Klose with a K, 973. Frank Klose, 973. Robert wants to know, who will be the first player on this team that gets traded? And I guess it's a tough question to answer because you don't know where they're going to be at that deadline. They're starting to hit a little bit of a free fall here. So are they going to... Last week, I don't know if anybody else heard the Matt Klintak interview. He was on Sirius XM Radio. And he said, look, we'll do whatever we have to when the time comes. We're not at that time right now. And he said, look, I have no problem telling you, I have no idea where this team is going to be in a couple of weeks. So they are in an interesting spot. But you would think that even if they are around where they are right now, that they're still going to look to trade some of their guys. So who are some of the candidates, Frank, that you think would be, that other teams will call for?
Well, the one team that I like to point to that might be in a similar position to where the Phillies are now is the 2001 Oakland Athletics. They were heading into the trade deadline as a promising young team that was playing much better than they were. And instead of standing pat, they traded Kenny Rogers, which was a big deal at the time. Kind of gave so it was before their young aces really came aboard. Remember they had the Mulder, Zito, Hudson trio there. So what they did was they traded Kenny Rogers, and then they allowed some of the young players to come up. So in that context, I think Jeremy Hellickson could be traded whether or not the team is in contention. If Hellickson's pitching well, he might have some value to a contender, and they might be in a position where they can promote somebody from AAA Lehigh Valley that could easily fill his role, so that they're not necessarily subtracting a whole lot from their major league roster. So that said, I think Hellickson might be the most likely to go. If you look at their rosters, they have a few intriguing names. We've talked before about Jeanmar Gomez. I think Jeanmar Gomez is going to look very attractive to a contender that needs a not necessarily a closer, but a back of the end setup man. I think what we see with Gomez is that he's pretty steady. He doesn't blow up and give up 4 runs in one shot. A lot of those 100-mile-an-hour closers, they give up a lot of long balls. When somebody connects, they connect hard. Well, Gomez, you don't really get that. So with Gomez, somebody that needs a 7th-inning reliever, needs an 8th-inning reliever, is really going to look at him and say, you know what, that's a steady bullpen arm that we could really use. And he's signed for next year as well. So that kind of adds to the trade value that Gomez has, is that the acquiring team isn't going to give up a whole lot just to have him for 2 months. They're going to have him for 2 months and all of next year. So those would be the two that I think are the most appealing. You have some other pieces like Andres Blanco. The question is, like I think we saw with Jeff Francoeur last year, is yes, he's a nice reserve piece on a roster for somebody, but the mentorship level might actually trump anything that they could get back. So we might see Blanco drawing some interest, but he might mean more to the team if they actually keep him. And then another useful piece, Peter Borges, which I just mentioned, if somebody needs a defensive replacement for an outfielder, like the Phillies took Pat Burrell out of the game every single game. If you remember back in 2008, usually they threw Eric Bruntlett out there, but Borges has some nice value as a defensive player. And finally, Andrew Bailey is looking pretty good. If the Phillies are going to have to hit a point where they either decide to give him a commitment for the future, or maybe he's a valuable trade commodity, or it could work out to his advantage, where if they don't feel Neris is ready to be closer and Gomez is traded, well, then Bailey could step in, and the Phillies will have to decide long term, because they only have him on a short-term deal here. So it's something we'll have to see going forward if the Phillies want to make a commitment to Bailey, or I think Bailey wants to be a Philly. So we'll see where that ends up. That might play into the equation too. But as to who gets traded first, it'll be whoever's calling the Phillies and offering something. So, but.
It's funny you mentioned Francoeur, and then of course what Utley did. I was wondering, they didn't get a whole heck of a lot for Utley. It wasn't like they got what they got for Rollins. They got more for Rollins really than they got for Utley, right? I mean, it would have been interesting to see if Utley and Francoeur were kind of still here on this team the way this team is playing. Francoeur, maybe playing some right field part time, and Utley being that kind of middle of the order guy, because as much as Utley struggled last year, he's
red hot right now.
He's been hitting the ball for the Dodgers. So those are two guys that you wonder. Now, hindsight 2020, obviously, you didn't think this team was going to be any good, but those two guys might have been two pieces that would have helped this team out.
Well, Francoeur, you really couldn't commit to him, because if all things had gone well, Asche and Aaron Altair would have been on the roster all along. And when you count those two along with Goodell, Herrera, and certainly Borges, they really don't have any space. So
if they signed Francoeur instead of Borges,
that's something you could say.
Borges being a Clintek guy.
Yeah, he was, I suppose, but I was not a big fan of signing Borges. I mean, he's great in the field. I think what they wanted to do is they wanted to, and he doesn't even steal that many bases if you look at his career. But the sure defensive arm for young pitchers, I think they wanted. That was their focus with Borges, that they could throw somebody in the outfield, and that would give pitchers a sense of confidence. So that's why I thought they brought him in. But so I really don't fault them over Francoeur, and really. If you look at his numbers as an offensive player, I think I read a stat somewhere where the only player worse than Ryan Howard since his Achilles injury has been Jeff Francoeur.
Well, I guess last year he did provide a little bit of pop, and he plays not a bad defensive player, which is what Borges is being really here for, is because the two corner outfielders save a lot of plays.